Hey everybody, and welcome back to another abstract watercolor video. I'm playing with the Paul Rubens palette today, and I put together two palettes from them. I had the standard 24 watercolors, and recently they were so kind and sent me the Seascape set, and there is a video up on my channel. I'm going to link it for you in case you are interested in this watercolor palette. And I put the both together, so I have a bigger palette now. There were about, I think, 10 colors that were different. And today I wanted to play with a limited color palette. I'm limiting myself to 4 colors, and I try to just explore them a bit more and play with them. And when you limit yourself, it's very interesting which colors you can mix amongst the colors, and you also learn a lot about the colors and the paints. And you can see that the vermilion red I'm using here, I'm not sure if it's the vermilion, but it looks like it. It pushes away the other pigments. It bleeds into the green a lot, and that's a really nice thing to know. If a color pushes away other colors, or if it doesn't do that, so you can just use that effect in your work. I also used a pink, not sure which color that is. I have swatched the colors so I know which color I'm picking, but I don't know the names of them. I have written the numbers of the colors to the pens, so in case I'm running out, I can have a look which color that was. I brought in some contrast by mixing that pink with the green. And that's also interesting that you can see how your mixes are looking, and you can explore which darks you can create with the color palette. When you put together a color palette, I would recommend that you are using different color tones. So a lighter color, a mid-tone color, a darker color. So you can have you have everything that you need to build a big color range. My last color is that kind of Naples yellow. I'm not sure, that's probably not a Naples yellow, but it looks a little bit like it. And I'm using that just to play a little bit and bring in a little bit more variation. For me, limiting my color palette is often a bit difficult because I really like to use a lot of colors, but it's very helpful. But I can't stay with 3 different colors. I think that would be really hard for me. But probably I could have mixed the pink with that yellow to create that kind of orangish red. So I could have saved on that. Probably that would have been possible. I'm swatching the colors to the left side in this journal. I usually only play on the right sides when I do a painting because you can see how the pages are buckling. The paper is quite thin. It is a good quality watercolor paper, but it's too thin. And that's why I'm a little bit struggling with that journal, but it's one of the best watercolor journals I have. Because I do not buy pricey journals. I don't want to spend that money on just an art journal because it's just playing, it's experimenting, and often it happens. I have, for example, an Etcher watercolor journal, which a lot of people love, but I don't. So I will not spend a lot of money for a journal I probably then don't like. So I'm working with the journals that work the best for me, and that is one of them. I just don't like that the paper is so thin. it just never flattens, even if the paints are dry, and that's a little bit annoying. And here I just swatch the colors to the left, so I see what I've used and I can use it as reference for a future painting, for example. And that's always good to have that on hand. And you can also explore and mix the colors to see what you can do with them. For my painting, that's quite dry almost, and I'm now going in adding some paint splatters. I really love that texture. It brings in another layer and creates a lot of depth. With all the layers I'm now creating on that abstract piece, I add more depth, and I just try to keep it loose. And one of the loosest things you can do is add some splatters. That's an easy style element to use. I'm using the colors I've been using for the painting, of course. I used my little fern brush to make the splatters because it makes really tiny splatters, and I also then used it to bring in a little bit of mark making. And I used that brush stroke also, I think, in my last, maybe not in the last, but in one of my last videos. It's a really nice way to explore which brushes you have and which kind of marks they can make to bring in more interest. So it's always good to change brushes maybe in between, and sometimes try them with more drier, in a more dry version with less water, and then explore them what they do when you add a lot of water. And all these different types of brushes can make interesting effects. And I'm someone who never buys expensive brushes because I am a person that tends to leave brushes in water, so you don't have to have expensive brushes. That works with every tool you have at home. I picked a green. I think that is one of my favorite greens from the Derwent Intense line. I don't know the name. It's a very dark green, and I use it a lot for my landscape sketches. And I think that's a brand new pencil, and I'm just making some marks with it. I'm dipping the nib of it into water because it's a water-soluble pencil. It will release a lot of pigment when it's wet, and that gives another interesting line. It's just different to using it dry. What you also can do with them is scribble into the wet paint if you want to. That's also quite interesting. I'm now going through my acrylic markers. I have a set from Artix here at my desk, which I really like, and I use it a lot in my sketchbook because it's opaque and you can cover up things and make highlights. But I also like to use these in abstract watercolor pieces. I also often use the Posca markers. The Posca markers are a little bit better with watercolor because they have that more inky bullet tip, and they do not rub as much on the paper as the brush tip does it. So with the brush tip, I'm mixing up that watercolor a little bit more than the Posca marker does this. But I don't mind in this case, and I can just go over it a second time once that is dry if I want to. But I really like the color, and they have a big range of colors, and you always find a matching color for your piece, and that's really nice. I'm picking a variety of materials to do the mark making. I always like having different textures. If you only use Posca markers, it can get boring, so I'm using colored pencils, Neocolors, Posca markers. You can use any type of product you have over the top of the watercolor painting. You even can add another layer with watercolors on top. That's what I sometimes do. I think I will do it also on this one later in the process. And I think it makes it easier to bring in depth and interest when you have different materials, because then you get automatically different textures. And here I searched for a red that is matching my orangish red on this painting. I found a tiny bit of a neo color, which is the perfect red, and I just make some marks on my painting. If you want to see more abstract watercolor paintings, I shared already a bunch of them with my lovely Mixed Media Play members here on YouTube. You can join my membership. There is a link in the video description, and I'm going to link up a video at the top right in the info card so you can check that out. I think now I'm grabbing my watercolors again, just to bring in another layer and more depth. And I'm mixing that dark color to just make some brush strokes on top and draw a pattern. And that's what I think is really interesting. What you also can think of, instead of painting a positive pattern, you can paint the negative space around it, and that's an element I use quite a lot. And that makes it really interesting, and that brings in even more depth, I would say, because it looks just different than painting the positive image. And I'm trying to do that here a little bit by creating a pattern. And I'm also going to paint in a botanical shape, just the negative space around it, and then that the color from underneath is then the positive image. Not sure if this makes sense, but you will see what I'm doing soon. And I really like to not use black. I really like that I am able to mix a dark color with the colors that I have in my palette. That's something I always think about when I'm picking a color palette. Will I be able to mix a dark color from the colors I have? So here it's the green and the pink. It mixes kind of a black, grayish black color. You can use a blue and a darker brown to mix kind of a black color, and that can be really interesting. And here I'm drawing with the pen, with the brush, kind of a botanical image, and then I'm painting the negative space, and I'm going to finish that once it's dry with some line work and a Posca marker. I also want to mention the Mastering Mixed Media Expo. It's a free online event starting May the 1st, and it's definitely worth to sign up. It doesn't cost you anything. You can join a lot of artists' lessons. It's running for 2 weeks, and I'm going to share an abstract watercolor painting with mixed media, of course, in my class. So I'm giving you the link in the video description. Check it out. I'm using a normal pencil and make some light scribbly marks over the top of the painting. I really like that to bring in even more looseness and some more interest that you don't see at the first view. And here you can see me outlining that botanical shape with a Posca marker. I decided to use a black one, but I think it might have been a bit nicer to use an peachy one. So I will note that down, probably on the left side of the spread later, just to keep in mind that this is a part I would change. And what I also really like doing when I have a painting that I probably do not like as much, that I then note down what I like about it, because there's always something to find that's good within a painting. And when you note that down, you can take that forward into the next painting. I'm now going to think about my focal point, and I also decided to bring in a little bit more of these black marks because I used that deep black outline for the botanical image. So I decided to bring in some black marks, and I try not to put these into the area where I want to create my focal image. So I'm thinking about that a little bit ahead. Yeah, and I'm just making a dot pattern in black. I also wanted to bring in another style element, and I'm using a few background stamps here. That's one with a math formula, and I really like it just because of the style of the writing, and I'm adding that just in a few areas. I added it to the bottom left where I want to bring in my focal point, and I'm going to add it to the right, and I'm using a post-it note to mask the white border because I don't want to stamp outside of my painting. I'm using the VersaFine clear ink to stamp because I'm just working on watercolor paper, then this is the best ink, and I've laid a piece of foam underneath my page. That also makes it easier to stamp because stamping in a bulky journal on watercolor paper is not easy. You hardly get a good impression. And I'm also picking one of the number stamps from one of our Mix It Up sets. You can use any kind of background stamp you have. I really love adding text just because it's so different to the painted stuff. It's almost like you create a collage just without collage. So I think that's really nice, and I really like the results I get. There is a blog post linked in the video description where you can have a look at the close-ups of the painting, so you can jump over and have a closer look at the finished painting. I'm now searching for an acrylic marker that has a similar color like my botanical image that I put to the top right. And I think, I'm not sure what I'm doing with it. I think I'm going to add some more mark making. Yeah. I wanted to make a botanical focal point, and instead of just drawing it myself, I thought I'm going to take it easy and just stamp myself the guide for it. Because stamping on watercolor paper doesn't work that well, I usually would stamp the image on a separate piece of paper, then stamp it to the page, then cut it on the outline, directly on the line, from the separate paper, and glue it into the image that I've stamped to the page, so I don't lose any details. I would probably only cut out the leaves and glue them in, but today I want to draw over that image and also color it in with markers to make it pop up from the background. But instead of coloring it in, you can paper piece it with collage. So that's another interesting option. I'm drawing the outlines with a Posca pen, and I do not draw the veins. I'm going to cover them up with an acrylic marker, and I speed that part up because that took me a while and I don't want to bore you, and I think it's not very interesting watch me coloring in. So I'm picking some markers. I have Poscas and the Artex marker. These are exactly the same colors, I would say, and I'm just looking which one works better. I think I'm going for the Poscas all the time because they just bring out a little bit more ink and they have better coverage. For the veins of the leaves, I'm using a white Posca marker once the other layers are completely dry. I think that lightens it up a little bit and makes it a bit more interesting. Yes, and that's my finished page. I think there is enough to see. Maybe I've overworked it a little bit with the mark making. I always tend to do that because I'm having so much fun doing it. And here you can see the finished painting. Jump over to the blog to have a closer look at the photos, and don't miss the Mastering Mixed Media Expo. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope we will see us next time. Bye!